Welcome to Visionary Voices Exchange, the podcast that disrupts how we think about blindness and low vision. So join us as we amplify the voices of individuals, families, and professionals living, learning, and thriving with blindness and low vision. We're your hosts, Janet Lebrecq and Carlos Servan. Hello, Carlos.
Hey, Janet. One more week here.
We are, and we're getting closer to the holidays. So I always get excited when it becomes the time to start thinking about the holidays.
I am too, except when I need to buy presents.
Yeah.
Not because of the money necessarily, but wondering what to buy.
Yeah, it gets harder every year. But I think our guests this evening may have some ideas too later on in our conversation, but folks will be happy to know that we have a fantastic guest who is joining us, Dr. Tracy Williams from Spectrios Institutes for Low Vision Rehabilitation. So, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us.
What a pleasure it is to join you both. I have the same passion as the both of you two, and that is to work with people with vision loss and make sure they're never defined by the vision loss, only their heads and their hearts.
Agreed. Tracy, what actually led you to this particular field?
Oh, what a godsend. I was a pre-med student, and I wasn't sure where I was going. I always felt like I wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I tried hard, and my parents always encouraged me to go into the health field. I always felt like, oh boy, I'm not sure this is a good idea, because I just, I was the kind of kid in school that had to make a lot of flashcards. I couldn't sleep on a book and get an A. I had to work at it. And so when I was a pre-med student, it was a shock for me when my advisor said, now, you're going to have to clean up your act a little bit. You need all A's and B's. I'll sign you off for pre-med for the first semester, but, these aren't the easiest courses. And boy, that scared me straight. And so I tried hard, and I didn't want to disappoint my parents, but I didn't want to disappoint myself. And sometimes when I say things are a godsend, I really believe everybody has a gift, and I don't have very many, but I almost felt like I was led in the direction of the health field. When I was only 19, I did an exchange program to Costa Rica, and I was with a Peace Corps family. And, it struck me that being an eye doctor would be a fun thing, because so many people need help with their eyes, and what a beautiful gift to be able to restore vision if possible. But sometimes vision isn't just the eyes; it's the vision you have in your head and heart. So, I can't really explain it. I applied to, I think, 4 medical schools, which is ridiculous, and I was the first person in my family even to, go on to advanced professional school. And I applied to one optometry school, and it was in Chicago. It was the Illinois College of Optometry. And honestly, I didn't know the difference between optometrists and ophthalmologists. And I did know that optometrist training was 4 years, and it was somewhat competitive. There was only 100 students in my class. And oh my gosh, they were like all A and B students, and they had a passion for vision. So, you know what? I got accepted. At the time, I was just going to get married. I said, okay, my life plan is ready. And so I went to the optometry school, and, optometrists are trained kind of like dentists or maybe veterinarians. They go to their own school, and it's like 4 more years after college. And I chose an internship when I was in my 3rd year to work with children and adults with vision loss at the Chicago Lighthouse. And that was a very lucky move. because that's where I caught the fever, to work with people with vision loss. And I had two mentors there. One was the president of the optometry school. This is the late, great Al Rosenblum, and he was a pioneer as an optometrist in the low vision field. Mm-hmm. And I also had a pretty famous hereditary retinal specialist. His name is Jerry Fishman. Now, I'm old, and maybe some of you wouldn't relate to this, but these two guys were like Sergeant Carter, and I was pretty much like Gomer Pyle. And I just got beaten up pretty good because I just needed to do my clinical work and learn a lot, and so on and so forth. But I just love working with people with vision loss. So what happened was I volunteered to be a teaching assistant with them, and they were shocked with that. So I kept on working there whenever I could. And then the two of them said, you need to go on in school, and we want you to go to New York. And there's a famous ophthalmologist by the name of Eleanor Fay, and she's kind of known in ophthalmology as the mother of low vision. And I already knew, who she was. And both of these doctors, Rosenblum and Fishman, approached me, and they said, if we can get you accepted there, would you go and train? And I said, sure. I didn't think I had a chance, And these two fine doctors told a pack of lies, and I got accepted. And so I went out there and I trained with Eleanor Fay, the late, great Eleanor Fay. And I learned a lot because I was at that time, it was like the New York Lighthouse, New York Association for the Blind. And it gave me a new perspective of the comprehensive, multidisciplinary nature of low vision rehabilitation. And I got to train with, again, some spectacular person. There was another doctor named Bruce Rosenthal who was out there. He was great. And it really kind of made me special. I'm not saying I deserved it, but I think in the United States, there's about 70,000 optometrists and ophthalmologists, but I think there's only about 300 or 400 residency trained low vision doctors. And so when I came back to Chicago, I was broke, of course, and looking for a lot of jobs, but things started happening. Like I got a job at the Chicago Lighthouse. I taught at the optometry school. I was asked to be in a top practice in Chicago. I'm paying my debt down, but I'm getting a lot of great experience, and I'm learning a lot from the people I work with as well, who are children and adults with vision loss. So I probably rambled too much there, but that's where I really got a fantastic start.
Well, I love to hear about how people got their start, because it is, first of all, it's very interesting, but also it really does help people to understand, the connection between, the work that you do, but also, obviously, it's your passion as well. And that's what makes you such a great doctor.
Well, thank you. I think all of us tonight have that passion and drive. I can tell you that when my son and daughter both teach. My daughter teaches 6th grade, and my son teaches 4th and 5th grade. And when they ask me to come in and talk to the students, I really do make a point about letting them know that I really believe each and every one of them has a gift. And the greatest thing is when you discover that and you work at it. And if you're passionate about it, guess what? You don't work ever in your life. Yep. It's fun, and I still work because honestly, I feel every day that I go to work is going to be inspiring. I feel like I can honestly impact someone's life, and I they impact me too. And I think we've trained now. I didn't get to the fact that, I actually had the opportunity from the ground up to establish a non-for-profit multidisciplinary, accredited non-for-profit group. And next year is our 40th anniversary. And we've seen about 25,000 patient visits, and we've seen over 11,000 children in the Illinois schools, K through 12th grade. And it's been such a passion. This agency called the Spectrios Institute, before, when I first started, it was called the Dike Center for Visual Rehabilitation. And the Dike family, that's what it was named after, gave us $100,000 to establish, and there's only like 3 of us at the time, there's 12 now, but to establish a low vision center. And we work closely, the founder of this was Dr. P.K. Gieser at the Wheaton Eye Clinic. And so Wheaton is in Illinois, it's a suburb west of Chicago. And so that's where we first started. But our name, Spectrios, was changed from Dike to Spectrios because our board just felt that the Dike name around us, it was such a philanthropic, family, and they gave to a lot of groups. And Spectrios actually means spec, not spectacle, but we do the full spectrum of comprehensive low vision rehabilitation. So that means not just the low vision residency trained doctor, but also the rehabilitation component, the rehabilitation teacher, the occupational therapist, and also access technology with staff that have vision loss. And finally, coping and counseling support. And the end of the name, Trios, is our triad philosophy that we work on the head, the heart, and the eyes.
Yes, unbelievable. I think also that there isn't enough information out there with regard to vision care, in that, we talk about everybody should get, their annual physical, they should get, their heart checked, they should get colonoscopies at certain ages. And you do hear people should, get an eye exam, but there is not enough emphasis placed on the role that eye exams can play in the overall general health of every person.
Well, you're exactly right from the standpoint of when I was a student, in the optometry school, you're soon taught that the third most diagnostic area, aside from blood and urine, is looking at a person's retina, looking in the back of the eye. Mm-hmm. And so when a person doesn't take advantage of going in and just having a routine eye examination, especially if you say to yourself, now, wait a minute, Dad had macular degeneration, or Mom had glaucoma, or there seems to be lazy eye, amblyopia running in our family. It's just, it's our main sense. And I think the thing is, where we sort of fit in is, if you think of it like a fence, like one side of the fence is your primary care, and if you go in for that eye examination and doggone it, they say, oh, you got something happening in your retina and we need to refer you to a retinal specialist, let's say. And then let's just say that the retina specialist says, oh, you're a diabetic, and you should have a dilated examination every year. And I noticed that you have some early diabetic changes. You have diabetic retinopathy. And so, a doctor sees that, and we're hoping still that glasses, can redirect misguided light in your eye to hit your retina. Your retina's okay. You get 20/20. But sometimes people might think that glasses will get you a new retina, but glasses just move light to hit the back of the eye, and it's like, I can't get down to that good vision with those glasses like I could before. There must be a reason for that. And if the retinal specialist cannot make it 20/20, you keep that specialist on your team because they've got to watch that retina and make sure that there's no medical treatment that you need. But if you do have some permanent vision loss, here's where they go on the other side of the fence. And this has been something that the National Eye Institute has pointed out, that if people out there have any permanent vision loss, they should be co-managed on the rehab side, meaning go to a low vision rehabilitation center and have them work on your head, heart, and eyes. In other words, the person. You know, the retinal specialist is working on the layer, and this is important. The retina, the film of the eye, so to speak, and doing everything he or she can do to keep it stable. But they are not going to be the ones that spend the time to help the person with vision loss learn how they can live with the vision loss. So I think the co-management, and I know all about it because being like a Forrest Gump, I served at the National Eye Institute for 6 years, and this is a standard of care to have co-management, both the medical side and the rehab side. So you almost form a team. And this is how a person with vision loss can avoid depression. This is how they can stop filling the buckets of maybe frustration, anger, and depression and start hitting that bucket of fruitfulness. This is how they can begin to learn how they can address activities of daily living at far, arm's length, or near, how they can keep jobs. They might be able to still drive. Bottom line is hope, isn't it? It gives them hope. So if you're only on one side of the fence, you're more at risk for depression, and you never get the focus on, let's just say, your head, heart, and eyes, so you can continue to keep your membership in the little locomotive club, you know. I think I can. So that's the beautiful part of it. And I know, Janet, you're such a humble celebrity. It was so impressive to me when you were the rehab director in Washington, D.C. under the Obama administration and all the things that you had done, because you were certainly a catalyst for me.
Well, I think we got awesome community across the country. And I know that one of the things that, you know, people are not always as familiar with are the different types of eye conditions, and some of the ones that are the most prevalent. We all hear about cataracts because we know that as part of the aging process, you know, people can acquire cataracts, but we don't often hear about some of the others, like you mentioned, diabetic retinopathy. But how about if you just walk us through what are some of the most common types, and how do they impact a person's day-to-day living situation, independence for employment or independence for education?
I think the first thing is we all know that vision loss hits all age groups. You can have a baby. Everybody is so happy, and then suddenly the doctors say, I'm seeing something here. I see eyes that have involuntary movement back and forth, or I see a pupil that's white, or just, you know, so there's so many congenital issues. Sometimes a baby born with retinopathy of prematurity, you have to be on guard to look to make sure that there's no vision-threatening issues. And genetics, I mean, there are some children that might have albinism, or they might have a congenital optic nerve issue. Science is getting smarter and smarter. And, you know, genetic testing is getting better and better, cheek swabs, blood. And then you have age groups. I mean, you can have trauma, and then you can have disease entities that lead to vision loss, hypertension, diabetes, thyroid, on and on. And then there's the aging process, doggone it. And so, you know, I guess there's some prevalences in some races. Like sometimes I think I see with Caucasians maybe a greater prevalence for this age-related macular degeneration. Of course, they can have glaucoma too. African Americans, glaucoma, Hispanics might have diabetic retinopathy. It's not that pure as categories, but I'm just saying, as we get older, the eyes can be more challenged. And some of the choices we make, both our diet, exercise, environmental, they can be factors, because some things, it's not just A is the answer. It's like A plus B plus C plus D. It's like, if you talk about macular degeneration, it's like, yes, it's genetic. And don't be a smoker. And I hope you keep your cardiovascular good. And I hope you're not a sun worshiper. And I hope that you like green leafy vegetables. And I sure hope that you exercise a little bit, keep your muscle tone good, and get the circulation. But I'll tell you one that I think is important too. Continue to have purpose in your life and socialize. So what I mean by that is, I think one of the medicines that's pretty good is being distracted from your woes. So, don't let vision loss stop you. And I think you have to invest in helping yourself. Like I have a dog, Bootsy, and she had a bad tooth, and she had a growth in her mouth. And the vet said, that's why she's not eating and her tail's not wagging. And, we got to take care of that. And it turned out that it was about an $800 bill. But I say this because sometimes people don't invest in themselves. They wouldn't spend $800 for low vision rehabilitation. So I think that some of the problems, and a strong message I would make is, number one, if you have vision loss, you have any vision problems, you should ask on the primary care or the more advanced, ophthalmological care. You should say, can I be co-managed with low vision? Because I want to be the best I can be. I don't want to victimize myself the rest of my life. I would rather look up in the sky, maybe in a spiritual sense, and say, Lord, I don't know why I got this, but, I've grieved enough. I want to move on, and I want to be the best person with this. And I'm telling you, I would like to be the mentor and help other people with this. But I'm going to say it again. I am not going to be defined by a vision loss, only my head and heart.
Sure. And, it's always interesting to have that understanding, because I obviously, my eye condition, was diagnosed when I was young. So growing up, you didn't hear that much about the connection between having an eye exam, low vision, and rehabilitation. And I always now like to refer to it. I am so happy that there is still that connection. There's still a lot more work that needs to be done. I would love to see ophthalmology better connected with optometry and be a part of that sort of that 360-degree approach, to medical care, because it has to align. And I think that it makes such a difference in the decision-making process that people make, when they receive a diagnosis like that. And certainly, Carlos, your involvement, with your agency being a commission for the blind and visually impaired, you see that at every age group also, right?
That's right. Yep.
And, so I think that it is important, to have that multiple approach, to addressing it. But then I also think equally important, and I'm sure that you have to deal with this as a doctor, seeing patients all the time, is when they're given that diagnosis. And I don't think that we can underestimate the impact, both emotionally, psychologically, that kind of diagnosis, receiving that diagnosis. I will forever remember the day I received my diagnosis. And I remember going home, laying in my bed. I was a child. I was 10 or 11 years old. But the very thing that I remembered was the word, the actual title of the condition. And I remember trying to spell it. But for me, as a 10 or 11-year-old, that's the way I dealt with it in trying to first understand, what does this word mean, and what does this mean for the rest of my life?
You know, your story is such a powerful one, and this is what I mean about doctors learning from their patients. And I'm just going to say, our health care is excellent, but we must strive at those critical moments when, unfortunately, we have to deliver a pretty tough diagnosis to have the right scripts. And the right scripts contain good direction and hope. Mm-hmm. You cannot take hope away from a person. And I think it's one thing to be, you're so thankful for doctors that are able to come up with these definitive diagnosis, etiology, prognosis, and treatment. But we need to be a team, and we need to also say to ourselves, this is a human being, and how those words register in their minds could be critical. And if authoritative voice says things like this, that, okay, you have a diagnosis of glaucoma, and we're going to take the best care of you. We're going to show you how you can be stable, and we'll try to help you along the journey to try to keep you as visual as we possibly can. But we're not the only doctor. And we are going to get other professionals involved that look at the whole person. In other words, can guide you with the appropriate training and tools. You're like an apprentice carpenter now, and you need to get the tools and training so you can be the master carpenter. And the thought here is, I think if you and I, in fact, I might recommend this. If we could see the Surgeon General, what I would say is, there are treatment modalities out there. The first one is, of course, a drug eye therapy. And then there's eye surgery. But I would just say we're missing a major treatment modality, and it's called vision rehabilitation. So I'm just saying that, unfortunately, our society and health system needs to get there. And I know that's what we're all trying to do. But I tell the residents that I train in low vision, I tell them that, after your training, well, first of all, if you do low vision, you'll find it pretty common that you get a lump in your throat and a tear in your eye, because when you see what these people are going through and what they have achieved, it just is such a catalyst for me, let me say. And the second thing, when they ask me, when I'm done training, what will be so great about this training? And I'll say, you will be able to go into any clinic room, no matter what the permanent vision loss is that the individual has, and you will be able to see potential in that person when maybe nobody else does. And how do we miss not having this co-management when this is what it truly offers? Hope supported by science. So I'm just saying that I think it's critical that when you deliver a diagnosis that's a tough one, that you have to give the person a place to land. And I'm saying that landing exists. Now, we need to work on training more manpower, and we need to try to fund this important treatment modality, because it's been over 100 years as a non-for-profit. And it's a non-for-profit because insurance, doesn't pay for the surgery that we do, so to speak. In other words, when people need special prescriptive glasses, and I'm talking about ones that might have telescopes in them or microscopes, special glasses in the future, like we see with Meta glasses, will have the AI component. We have got to get some of these important tools supported by insurance so that people do not have to go on to disability, that they can follow their gifts, and that these folks can be gainfully employed. Most people that I work with, and especially the young ones that I've seen in the schools, oh my gosh, what they want is they want a normal life. They want to be gainfully employed. They don't want to have to be stereotyped or go on disability. So I'm just saying, a person with vision loss, you have to put together a team. And sometimes you have to be the advocate for yourself. And you have to really search out, how can I get both sides of the fence, the co-management?
Yes. Yep.
So, Tracy, let's say I'm a low vision person who comes to you and I get depressed, and you told your interns that you have the privilege to take a look at the patients and see their potential. So can you expand that a little bit for folks who are just...
Yes. One of the reasons why low vision doctors can't really make it in a for-profit setting is they only see about 6 patients a day. And why is it? Well, one, they have to do professional paternalism. What the heck does that mean? Well, they try to be professionals, but paternalistically, you begin by explaining and sharing to the patient what their diagnosis means, but not just the dark side of it. You show them what they have to work with. And many of them still have some vision to work with, but you have to also show them that they can get vision from their ears and fingertips. And oh my gosh, technology right now is a big paradigm shift. So I think that when I begin, I probably spend 30 minutes. I'll show them a picture of the back of their eye, if that's where it's at, and I'll explain to them, for example, why they can't look directly straight ahead. I mean, if you just give I always say there's not going to be a test, but let me just tell you the basics of the retina, the film in your eye. You have a retina that has about 300 million photoreceptors, but there is an island on the back of your eye, and that island is called the macula. That rhymes with Dracula. And ever since you've been a baby, you've learned to aim your eye to land the light off the object of regard right onto your macula, because that is the only place on your retina where you get that sharp vision, like 20/20 to 20/70. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Sometimes a macula is like a pie made of 8 slices, and you may have lost some of those slices. And this is why when you continue to look dead centrically, you see fragmented or wavy lines or this or that. Well, let me tell you what your sensory system is saying to you. It's saying to you, do you know the definition of insanity? It's doing the same behavior over and over again, expecting a different result. But just look a little above things or a little below or in front or past. That's called eccentric viewing. Now, don't expect to see clear, but here is the word we work with in this clinic: improvement. I'm going to try to improve your knowledge. I'm going to try to improve the tools, the vision that you have, and I'm going to try to improve your motivation and inspiration. And I'm going to tell you the psychosocial aspects, the educational is so important. I think most Americans would say one component that's missing on the medical side is education, and trying to help people with the questions they have answer those questions. Because if you have vignette visits, that doesn't get done. And that just furthers the case of why you have to co-manage these patients with these low vision professionals. And if there's no vision, then blind, rehab. But I'm trying to say that I maybe within the first half an hour, what I've done, and by the way, I always encourage a significant other or coach to accompany the patient. An extra set of ears in that room, watching and listening, because that person, I say this straightforward, I just say, your coach here will audit me, and if I'm full of baloney, I'm in trouble. But if they think I have some credibility, I'm establishing a support group for you, the patient, and for me. And I'm just saying, this is how we begin to build a bond, and we work together. And most of the patients are truly lifted. I mean, I have some patients that they're not ready. Sometimes they call them selective listeners, or maybe other baggage or emotions. We have thick skin. We always see potential. We never give up on the low vision side. And I just say that you have to be consumer driven. You're consumer driven. And so
can
I
you
always ask,
define what is a consumer driven?
Consumer driven for me is I have an expanded conversation. We call it your case history, right? Or functional history.
Okay.
But I always ask my patient, what did they do? What was how did they grow up? Where they went to school, etc. Many of them are shocked by that, but I'm trying to get an idea of the things that they like, what their goals are. And I actually ask them, what is your vision? What are your dreams? What do you want to do? I mean, what's been taken away from you? And I try to get them to say, well, once I had an 8-year-old child, and this child had Leber's amaurosa, and this child had very poor vision, oh my gosh, this child's vision was maybe 20/400 or worse, and it just seemed to be awful. And the father brought him in to see me, and he had been to a very, very fine pediatric ophthalmologist. They had the brilliant, early diagnosis, etiology, prognosis, all that. But this family, thought, that there was nothing for this child more than coming in every year to see the doctor and just seeing where they were at. Now, in the school, with the vision itinerant teachers, they were definitely leaning more towards the blind rehab side because of the prognosis being somewhat guarded, and also because the vision was so limited. So this child, I sat down with him. He was 8 years old, and I asked him, what would you like to see? And he told me a baseball card. And that was right up my alley, because I've been a doctor with the Chicago White Sox for 40 years too. And when he said a baseball card, I go, oh, geez, I hope I can make this work. When people go to get their eyes checked and you don't have anything wrong with your eyes, when you get over 40, you better get longer arms, or you better go into the doctor and get your eyes checked, because you have something called presbyopia. Sounds like a religion, but it's just a normal thing. But when you see the reading glasses in the store, they're between like 1 and let's say 3.5. But that's for people with normal vision, pretty much, who have good vision at far. But guess what? They're starting to climb the mountain of over 40 years old. They have presbyopia, and they need reading glasses. Well, those glasses I mentioned mathematically are like 3.25 at the max. I figured out with this kid, because of the great training I've had, that he needed a 40-powered lens, and that just might make him see the baseball card. Now, here, I'm going to add one more piece. In optics, whatever the number is, you divide it into 40, and that tells you in inches how close you have to hold it in front of your eye. So if you have a 3-powered lens, 3 into 40, 13 inches away.
Yeah.
40 is 1 inch in front of the eye. So we figured out that sort of magnification might do it. And so I showed that lens to the little boy, and before he pulled out his baseball card, he looked at the lines in his hand. And then his father is looking at this. And then he pulled out his baseball card, and he started reading some of the things on his baseball card.
Wow.
And his father's eyes welled up, and his father was pretty rocked by that. And the father kind of stoically said to me, "But will my son have to hold it that close the rest of his life?" And before I could answer him, and it would be no, because of access technology and electronic magnification that could expand that working distance, the little boy, 8 years old, says to his dad, "Well, what if I was a Martian, Dad? I was from Mars, and everybody on Mars had eyes like mine. And all they're hoping to do is be improved." And it was such a profound thing for an 8-year-old to say.
Sure.
That I think we have to reflect on these things. I mean, what did I just do? It wasn't what I do. And believe me, whenever I talk like this, I feel like I've got about 10 or 12 mentors behind me, But it was just part of training that low vision doctors get, where they learn to squeeze every last ounce of vision out of the patient. But they're also, the good ones are humble waiters, and they tell you what's on the menu, and they try to connect ways that you can go back to things that you maybe had no hope for. So what I'm saying is that when you work in the low vision field, you see and work with optics that aren't common. Like I work with glasses that have telescopes in them. In about 30-some states, people can drive with bioptic or telescopic glasses. And sometimes doctors do not have any knowledge of that. And I'm trying to say, do I climb in the car with them and check out if they have the skills? No, I don't. I had a hard enough time with my teenagers, but I'll just say, we first of all see if they can qualify with their visual field with what their regular vision is, and then what they can spot through the telescope. Now, for example, in Illinois, if you have one eye that is able to see 2100ths, and you can spot through a 2.2x or 3x telescope. Now, it's set up on top. It's like a bifocal for far. If you can spot 20/40 through that, and your visual field in that eye is 70 degrees temporal, 35 degrees nasal, on the horizon, 105 degrees, then the doctor can sign you off to at least move in the direction of daytime driving. But I'll tell you, is driving just that? Of course not. You have to have the skills, the confidence, the physicality. So what happens next? Well, then I sign them off as a physician to go to a certified rehabilitation driving center where they have occupational therapists who are trained to assess both cognitive and abilities driving. And boy, when a person passes that, you might think you put another 5 or 10 years on their life. And I'm going to tell you that most of the people that I see that drive put limits on themselves, and they do the right thing. But I'm just saying, sometimes we make judgments without the appropriate training, and we just have no knowledge of what the difference is between 20/20 and being able to function. So you don't, even in driving, you don't have to have 20/20 to have, an unrestricted day or night license. You only need 20/40. And to drive during the daytime, 2070. Well, you think they just randomly came up with that? No. And how long have those licenses been out there? So I'm just saying that driving is a very serious type of thing, and you need to have the appropriate credentialed professionals. But I'm just saying that these different activities of daily life are sometimes critical, so critical. And when we take things away without appropriate examination and studies, I mean, some of us are not qualified, to make judgments. So that's why we create a team and we do co-management.
Tracy, can we talk for a moment also about lighting? Because lighting is so critical to enhancing or actually increasing barriers to what visual systems actually, could be impacted by lighting if it's not the right type of lighting. And I can tell you that from having been a vocational rehabilitation counselor for many years, that oftentimes when we send people, and Carlos, you may run into this also, that sometimes when we send a client for a low vision evaluation, they'll come back and they'll say, you know what, I saw much better in the doctor's office, but when I go home, I don't see as well. What is wrong? And so I think that's an important, distinction to make.
Yeah. Well, let's start with a very important law in science. As you increase contrast, you decrease your need for magnification. It's an inverse law. Mm-hmm. So when I say that, I always let people know that, okay, let's just do a few things here. Which hand do you write with, right or left? Now let's try this. Stretch your hands out, make a little gun sight hole, and sight my nose. And I look for which eye is their dominant eye. At the end of the examination, I look to see which eye has the better anatomy. And so what I'm saying is your sensory system is going to go with the eye that has the better anatomy. Because if you have to eccentrically view, you can't hit corresponding retinal spots on both eyes. You're not going to have good depth perception, and you really need to go with your better seeing eye. And as you understand these things, eccentric viewing, you then realize that it's not just the optics, it's also the lighting. And so if you have let's say your right eye is your best seeing eye, then have the direct light source coming over your right shoulder.
Yes.
And it's just, it's like light is sight. The second thing is contrast also means when you eat, do you eat on a black plate with a dark cloth below it? I hope not. Mm-hmm. I hope it's like a white plate with a dark mat below it, because now you have a fighting chance to see the edge of the plate. And then most food, maybe not rice or mashed potatoes, but most food will stand out. And maybe you develop a system by, working with rehabilitation teachers or occupational therapists. You see, if you have that component, the rehab component, then you break down things with that rehabilitation teacher or occupational therapist, where you look at what are the activities of daily living that you do every day. Like I got up yesterday, and believe it or not, I did personal grooming. I'll tell the patient, arm's length and near. Then I walked my 3 dogs far. I got the mail, looked at it near. Then I sat down and had breakfast, arm's length and near. Then I drove my car far, dashboard, arm's length. And then I said, you see, you need to take inventory of every activity of daily living that you do and rate them. I'm great at this one. So I'm not too good. And this is where the teachers will look at, okay, let's see what prescriptive tools the doctors came up with. But let's look at ergonomics. Let's look at the lighting where you're holding things, how you position. Are you holding things at your midline, at your nose? Are you really inviting that badder eye, the poor seeing eye to the party? Pretend like you got a string coming off your nose. Stay on the side of the better seeing eye. And if you have to have stronger magnification, hold it closer to your eye. It's a lot easier if you favor an eye where it's perpendicular opposed to your two eyes being converged. And come on, you got to have a good direct light source. Access technology with smartphones and tablets is amazing. And I said before about AI, artificial intelligence, as long as we harness these things, is great too. And I'm saying that people have low vision devices. They weren't really made for that. And boy, I would like to work with some of these people more, with our population of people that really can benefit from these inventions. It's not just for the techies, but oh my gosh, there's so many applications I see.
Right.
And most of your good multidisciplinary centers have access technology.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are those of the most amazing advanced technology that amaze you these last few years, I guess?
Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you that years ago, I used to think that a CCTV was great. Right. And then all of a sudden they added scanners to them, Yeah. And you know what? Scanners are great. Oh my gosh, whether it's standalone, where you can have something scanning and you sit back and listen to it. And people should not be shamed, like, well, I want to use my eyes. You know what? If you're a football team, you want to only have a running game, have a passing game, a running game, anything you can do to win the game. That's the idea. And so I think that a lot of the spectacle amount. Listen, years ago, I was a beta site for Elvis. Now, I'm not talking about the singer from Memphis. I'm talking about, I worked with Johns Hopkins and NASA, and they had this huge head-bound thing, and, it was a camera on the top. And Dr. Fay actually called me up and said, Tracy, that's a piece of junk. And I said, I kind of know, but what do you think, Dr. Fay, about the video, like component of it? She said, Tracy, that's pretty good. I said, you know what? I was a young doctor working at the Chicago Lighthouse, and that famous scientific magazine called The Inquirer had just had an article out on the honeybee lens. And I actually know the guy for Designs for Vision. He's a fantastic guy, Richard Feinblum. And they had like 3 telescopes in the top of the glass that was looking like a honeybee lens, And I had all these patients call me up, and like the guy with the needle bursting balloons, I would tell them, oh gosh, this is expensive. It's not, not anything. If I had a brain in my head, I would have said, why don't you come on down to our low vision clinic and see it? And all these people would have had a low vision examination. And while that didn't turn out to be such a big thing, it did turn out to be like a predecessor for greater inventions ahead. And now technology. It's like the Elvis crashed and burned, but I was so glad to be involved with it because it helped me think, like hopefully a visionary saying, what is possible? And they made it smaller and better and better and better. So there's so many different devices. And I think that all this access technology, you got to get excited about this stuff. Sometimes it scares generations away, like the greatest generation or even the baby boomers like me. But I think that, when you have a challenge, you either decide you're up for it or not. And if there's improvement out there, you go for it. So I always say that people have an expectation bar. And when they come in and see me, they at first, and I don't blame them, they want a cure and they expect glasses to clean it all up. And they're looking for perfection, but I soon work on them to think like this. I say, now, I never blow the candle of, cure out. Yeah, I pray for it, I hope for it, but it's not here. It's not on earth. So you're down this expectation bar. Let me tell you, friend, you get your head focused on improvement. And I keep on saying this, improvement. Is it a bad day where you can come in and see a doctor like myself or professionals where you learn or you feel better about yourself, but maybe more importantly, you learn that there's technology and training that can make you smarter, better, kinder, whatever. But it keeps you with purpose, and keep on socializing.
And Tracy, that is such an important point. And, one of the things that I would love for our listeners to hear before we end our show tonight is, we often think about things like sunglasses and why sunglasses are important. Now, I think most of our society thinks that sunglasses are fashion, and they are fashion today. But sunglasses play an important role, and we now have things like transition lenses. But I always try to encourage people to wear them, to get good quality ones also, because it is this source. And it's certainly that accommodation. It's a form of an accommodation, to reduce that glare and keep those ultraviolet rays at bay for as long as possible to preserve your vision. And I think that armed with this type of information and armed with the resources that are actually out there across our country for people, number one, to become more aware of how best to manage your eye health, and that it is equally important to manage your eye health as it is your physical body and psychological and emotional health, and that we don't oftentimes combine those. So the information that you're providing here, and especially around protection, I think is absolutely incredibly valuable for people and thought-provoking in terms of, looking at the opportunity to, be your own best advocate. And if you're not, then bring somebody, like you said, bring somebody to that appointment, because often it's hard for us
You're right. You're right. You have potential. You are important. And you can do better. And let me tell you quickly about sunwear, because it's one of those factors. When I say you want success, it's not just A as the answer. A plus B plus C plus D. Some variables more heavily weighted, but I'm just saying sunwear. Here's what you got to know. Be a connoisseur of sunwear, because environments are not all the same. There's sunny days, there's overcast days, there's twilight and nighttime. So, okay, we sometimes use a brand called Cocoons that just wrap right over the top of their glasses, and they might like gray or amber when it's sunny. Gray kind of keeps the world's coloration normal. Amber gives a little bit of a contrast kick. Oh, it's overcast. Well, let's try copper. Copper might work. Let's just say it's twilight or night. Let's shift to maybe yellow and maybe orange or red. And sometimes people have different diagnoses like achromatopsia where they do like red. And I'm trying to say, what are the things you expect from your sunwear? Okay, here we go. Number one, light spikes, dark to bright, bright to dark. Keep it in the middle. That's what sunglasses can do. Eliminate glare. Glare off a surface that is wet, that the sun is hitting. Oh my gosh. A glare off of metallic or glass. Glare. Get rid of it. How about contrast? Heighten contrast. People know that vision, arm's length, far, near, and visual fields, peripheral, mid-peripheral, central. But they never think about contrast. And contrast is like when you have a cataract and things seem a little more cloudy. Sunwear filters, different colors can affect contrast. But even wearing them for safety, so there's so many benefits. So I'm just saying that anyone listening to this podcast, if you have vision loss, let me just say that you can do better and that you have potential. You cannot be defined by the vision loss. It's almost an attitudinal thing from a psychosocial. Build your team, get your good players on the medical side, but get going on the other side of the fence, and you'll feel better, you will do better, and you can help us change the culture. People think that they don't understand vision loss yet. We need to work on that. So it's been an absolute privilege for me to work in this field. I'm so thankful and grateful, and I look forward to every single day. And I just hope that if I have vision loss, I can be as good as many of the people that I've been around. And I'm just going to say that both you and Carlos, what you've accomplished in your life is so commendable. And I'm here for you every time.
Well, thank you so much. And
yeah, thank you.
The information that you've provided to people, I think, is very informative, but also inspirational. And I hope that people are encouraged, first of all, to go get those evaluations done, and certainly think of it as they're leading themselves, towards more independence and inclusion. And so I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight on this discussion so that we can inform our listeners, but also provide that critical information that people need to know. And thank you again for your commitment to the field, because it is absolutely critical, and we are underrepresented. Doctors like yourself are underrepresented. So I think having this kind of discussion hopefully will inspire someone who may be thinking about this field or didn't know a lot about it, but now they have a curiosity armed with information that they may actually consider going into this particular field. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. And during this joyous time of the year, I just hope that we can be with our families and be at peace and really have a very happy holiday. So happy holidays to everybody out there.
Thank you for sending that message of hope.
Yes, and happy holidays too as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, and good night.
Good night. Thanks a bunch.